Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to Drawing Down the Stars for our Witches Symposium. Today, I have my co hosts, Wretch and Dion. You guys want to say hi?
Hello,
Hello.
hello.
And we're joined, as always, by our special guest, Ammon from Lady Babylon. How are you doing, Ammon?
I'm doing great. Hail Satan.
Yes, hail Satan, everyone. so
Hail
today,
Satan.
today we're going to be doing a deep dive into sort of like these kind of non-binary gender identities and kind of gender transitioning in the ancient world and all of these different kind of we want to really look at this concept of gender and how people how it relates to sex and how people are kind of moving through it and kind of just have a general conversation. So to begin with, I wanted to, when we were doing our Cult Explorers episode earlier today, we were looking at the earliest reference to sort of gender transition, and Dion was able to find this. Do you want to talk about the myth that you found, Dion?
Yeah, um, it's about Ishtar, and this is in cuneiform. And basically, Ishtar is kidnapped into the underworld, and it says that no male or female can cross the seven gates to go into the underworld to rescue her. So the Creator God creates a hermaphrodite being, a Shunamir, that's able to get through the seventh gate and charm the demon. It's a female demon that has kidnapped Ishtar and put her to sleep. And he seduces her and steals the water of life and sprinkles Ishtar with the water of life. And she's able to resurrect. But because of that, the demon goddess curses the hermaphrodite being and all its kind. And so because of that, Ishtar uh, does a blessing or a boon, you could say, to remove part of the curse, and saying that she will have priestesses that are trans priestesses, basically male priestesses, male prostitutes dedicated to the goddess, and they're made from the stars, the elements of the stars.
Yeah, it says they have the elements of the stars and they can do divination. They can see into the future. That's the gift. But they're also cursed to be exiled from their homes and such.
If you don't hear the Mithras liturgy in that and all of the elements of the Mithras liturgy, that's all I'll
Okay,
say.
so, Ammon, talk to us about this Mithras liturgy because those who follow your channel know you've been referencing it a bunch, and it's like it's in the PGM. What is it really about? What's going on with that?
Yeah, it's an initiation. It's liturgical directions, right? For an initiation, including a nice, beautiful drug recipe. Oh God, it's so gorgeous. And we also have the phrases for the places that the initiate enters into, right? And a very, very um, regimented system of preparation for the initiate. So yeah, we've got a period of days that they have to do it. What they have to do every day, they derive this drug from it. It involves some kind of botanical poison with the scarab beetle, right? and
Right.
and a transformation of that over time into a communion that they take. We included other things like the acacia. You knew the acacia was going to be there, but we also have viper venom. Wow, it's fantastic! Surprise, surprise! Yeah. So we get to that place where we're actually guided. It's a map. It's essentially, what is the Mithraic liturgy? I'll just answer this and stop. The Mithraic liturgy, or the Mithras liturgy, as they like to call it, is a map for taking a interdimensional trip. It's a way of entering into death and coming back. And when you come back, you are, as they say in the text, born again. You have the water of life, right? And so this is, first century BC. So we're setting up the stage for Gangsta G, you know what I mean? So
Right.
yeah, gorgeous. I'll stop, but that's I love that. The Near Eastern stuff, love that. What did you guys think about that star association? Because that girl in the Mithras liturgy, she's standing there. Did I call her both genders? Yeah, I did. Right? It's a her and a him. Wait, what?
So this is something I want to ask you, because you see this, there are many mysteries, but you see this so often. I have to ask, is the mystery a transition? Is that essential to the rite here, this gender transformation,
Yeah, it is when that lover of God, enters into that metabole phuseos, that transformation of nature. Hecate, people totally blow Hecate, because they look at it through a medieval lens. They look at her through a medieval lens. She is that trimorph. She is the one who is both masculine, feminine, and the combination thereof. Yeah, and you're like, what? Yeah, no, right? She is that dual natured, they call her.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So if you didn't realize that the queen of the witches, the queen of the ancient witches is bi-gendered, oh no, you're in the wrong place, right? This isn't crone, mother maiden crone. This is not. They don't have that, right? The gods are ageless, right? They don't age. That's a fact. That's a property of the mortal existence, right?
Well,
Our
okay.
existence.
This just brings up one thing I wanted to ask you. Just the kind of, so we're talking to Fish, and Fish brought up the story of in the myths of Demeter. There's an old woman who's like a nurse named, I think it's Baobo, who flashes her privates, and then Demeter laughs at her. And then Wretch had brought up that you see a parallel of this with Hathor. Isn't that right, Wretch? Or
Yeah, Hathor flashes her vagina at Ray, or maybe it was Atum Ray. He's really old and grumpy at this point, and she does that to cheer him up. It works. It works well too.
I was gonna ask, did it work?
Yeah. He laughed, and it was all good after that. So.
But I wanted to ask you, what is this old figure? Because you do have some older nursemaid type figures in the myths that sometimes, at least in the medieval period, they associate with this crone figure. What's going on there?
Yeah, for that we're going to shift into the Roman ear. You're talking about that Anus, ANUS.
Right.
That was what the Romans called the nurse that you were talking about, the Anus. Okay. The Anus. And so typically how you'll see that translated, and from the best classical philologists, you'll see it as some kind of older or elderly nursemaid. You sometimes like nursemaid, that kind of thing. Yeah, but every once in a while, you come across another type of ANUS, and that Anus is a child. A little child, an assistant, a preteen assistant to a witch who knows her drugs and is able to produce them. Yeah. So Apollonius shows us that one, right? Apuleius shows us that. A couple of these burst into a guy and urinate all over him and make him smell like semen, right? Make him not semen, like a brothel, they say, like a brothel on his face, right? That's where we are in time and space, right there, within the Mithraic liturgy, which is that transformation from the daughter to the potentiated phanes, the oracular phanic power, right? It's it's how we know the future.
Right. And like this kind of crossing of the gender barrier and gaining magic and divination is just like so incredibly widespread. Like, I know, like Wretch, you're working on your volume 2. Do you know some other other mysteries that are going on where they're doing the same translation?
Mysteries with the transition of gender?
Genders, yeah, where someone's either becoming a bi-gendered being or they're transitioning entirely.
Well, I mean, depending on how you want to interpret the symbolism, you can see this in all kinds of places as the Hyros Gamos, the union of heaven and earth, or the union of the sun and moon in alchemy. There's all kinds of deities who, like, say, Krishna, who has trans qualities, or Shiva, or Odin, or Thor, or, Hermes. It really goes on and on as a key symbol in various Indo-European cultures in general, but, there's some signs of it elsewhere, like you guys found in Mesopotamia and Judaism, even in the Bible, the Kadesha, the temple prostitutes. It's really a key symbol that just goes everywhere, it seems, just about one way or another. And even in, say, Buddhism or Chinese mythologies, you get Avalesh. Wow, I'm going to murder this pronunciation, but Avalokiteshvara is sometimes depicted as a male or female. Guan Yin, another goddess, has also been Avalokiteshvara.
Yeah, Avalokiteshvara. Yeah, the
Okay.
Bodhisattva of compassion. Yeah.
So it just seems to be a common symbol. It's not necessarily always a literal transition in physical form, I don't think, but just a blending of opposites, male and female, union of opposites, and to achieve the monist awareness and overcome all duality. But, that sounds very Eastern, but it's also in line with the Western mysteries as well. So,
Well, you definitely like. I want to even ask you about that, Ammon, because like the more I'm studying the Western mysteries, especially the Greek mysteries, they all seem to have this kind of monistic bend to them. When you get to the end, anyway, they have that return to this cosmic womb of Nyx. Or am I just kind of reading into it?
I think I could answer that best by answering the last question. And if we forget that the boys are going through the transition, right? Who are these people who are doing it? It's all the people who are cutting their testicles off, right? There's a lot of them cutting their testicles off, right?
Yeah, many different reasons too.
And for some reason, these people seem to gravitate toward the profession of the magus. Have you ever noticed how many of these magi, these sorcerers, are cross-dressing, for example, number one. Number two, who make this kind of funny gynomorphic, Bacchic transition to a more feminine physique and expression. Yeah, so we can't deny the transition. That gynomorph is there for a cult reason. I mean, it's like nature itself reaches in and grabs those testicles and cuts them off.
And like, I mean, Dion, so when we're looking at all the drugs when you were doing your research, one thing I was noticing is they seem to parallel the same drugs that Ammon is talking about, that these drugs that are causing you to have this death and rebirth are also the same drugs of transition. What's going on there?
Don't know. We noticed that snake bite remedies are also used for menopause, and link up in the serotonin receptor sites, and a lot of them are estrogenic. I don't know how it works, but somehow the things are compounded together. And so many of these herbs that we take for granted. I never knew that oregano was estrogenic, and wormwood is estrogenic. St. John's wort, the spatolado, where they put it in olive oil. Yeah.
There's a Nobel Prize. I mean, this is all on the road to a Nobel Prize. Look at what we're talking about: health and that transition as a process, bringing that natural substance to ourselves and engaging this. Oh God, the Dion, Snappy, Gunk, fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, there's clearly a real tradition of physical transition and eunuchs and chemical that play here, but it's hard to trace out any kind of history of diffusionism because, well, trans people are natural and they're everywhere, and so it wasn't like trans people are a product of culture. It's just that's how they were born, or at least some of them anyway. And so we see it all over we see it even in the New World that shamans tend to be trans people for whatever, and sometimes they're excluded from their tribes, and it's not always a happy scenario, but they might marry a spirit of the opposite gender, and so they have to take on like they have to become a woman for their male spirit or vice versa. So it's a global phenomenon, and yet it seems to have been worked out in this chemical way in the old world in the most complex form that I can think of. But it's so universal. It's hard to sort out any chronology here, but it's clearly central to many culture mysteries. So
I think it's because of what you're saying, right? If trans people are ubiquitous and everywhere, then all of these cultures are going to have to deal with these issues. They're going to have to deal with people who are suicidal and who are going to want to go through these transitions, and it's going to, and especially, and you notice that it's the women who are bringing out this medicine that's helping these young men who are transitioning to becoming other women. It's like that. It's a cult of women. And I just keep thinking too, I was looking into the Hijra in India, which still maintain a lot of these deeply ritualized forms of transition, and they maintain these sort of familial units. And they have these guru mother lineages that claim to go back over 2,000 years now, where they're passing it on and they're teaching people how to go through this rite safely, and the drugs that are used so that you don't pass out and die and whatnot,
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of the magic that people are not seeing, that maybe now some of the psychedelic renaissance that we got going on, maybe now we'll look back and say, well, exactly what substances were being used and what were they doing, and what areas of medicine. This is a healing area. I think that's why all the resistance to it. We don't want to do anything that might help us to, be of more sound mind, right? So, oh wow, it's just, what's wrong with the picture? Well, the good thing is, at the root of your religions and the Christianity and Judaism that push your society, I'm talking to you evangelicals out there, right? On your side, this is the working of the devil. This is the working of the devil, right? You know it. At least you know it. But remember, Jesus was arrested with a naked boy for a reason. Any idea? Does this clear up why the whole Jesus? I mean, we've been talking about that forever. I'd like to know from you guys what you think about what's the big picture of everything going on.
Well, it's almost certain there's something going on with this gender play and power within the cult of Jesus, because I keep thinking, okay, the two aspects that are always underplayed within the mystery, I think, are number one, what are these powerful women doing? The Marys, your Salome. And why are they at the heart of these transitions from John to Jesus and then to Jesus's death? What is going on here? Because when you read between the lines, someone's ratting out Jesus and then he gets killed. Someone doesn't give him the antidote. Salome asks for John the Baptist's head. All these women are kind of playing the strings. And then the other thing is the gender transition. Jesus is clearly acting as this hermaphroditic being. He's engaged in all of these women's actions. And the same with John the Beloved.
He's using all the
one hermaphrodite, you have multiple.
He's using all the titles, right? He's pulling out all magic that has to deal with this hermaphroditic Christ, and he's using it, right? So yeah. Have you ever wondered? I would give half of my kingdom to find out what is so special about Salome. Yeah, I would give half my kingdom for that. If it costs the prophet's head, right? We make another Orpheus. Isn't it amazing how the mystery drives forward? And Paul the apostle is, this mystery is an operation and it's anomia, right? Yeah, welcome to the kingdom of Lucifer, right? Love it.
Dion, remember when we were digging into Mary Salome? So not even just her, there's the Herodias, the daughter of Herod Salome, but then there's Mary Salome, the mother of John, who's like a crime boss. Tell us about that.
Well, she's part of a lineage in the Bible. This is not just New Testament, but Old Testament. It's matriarchal influence. But a lot of these women get a bad rap. But if you read between the lines, they're the central figures in a lot of these stories that take place with the patriarchs. It's just that it's a patriarchal religion, so they're a subplot in the story. But it's these matriarchs. So with Mary Salome, I would see it as two titles. A title of Mary, going even back to Egypt, where you have Mary Auden, as a title, Meri in front of things, and then Salome, which is the title as well. So she has a double title. And the guy is Zebedee, or Zebediah, however you say his name. He disappears early. He's not really there. They have servants and a fleet of fishing boats. And are they fishing dreamfish, mollusk, which neither are there at that lake. But it's just ironic, that they deal with water. And that after the crucifixion, the first thing they do, they go onto a boat. And they're out there on a boat in the sea. And that's where Jesus appears to them. It's like if they're doing rituals on a boat.
Yeah.
Commanding the winds. They were out there commanding the winds, right? Yeah, totally.
It makes me think of the mystery too, because you get all this imagery you have that goddess of the sea and of the tree and of the star, right? It's that combination of all three, right? When you're drawing her down. So you always get that. And with Asherah, you have the same imagery, right? She's that anointing oil who walks on the water, right? And she's that pillar tree, so it's interesting.
And, there's another myth too. We talked about Otter Goddess, which is the goddess there at Galilee. But she's also the goddess at Ashkelon Lake, where they say her son Ixus is drowned in the lake of Ashkelon. You get that fish symbol for Christ. And that's supposed to be Otter Goddess's son, is the Ixus.
Aphrodite went into the fish, right? She became the fish. Gorgeous. Don't forget Cyprus. Nobody forgets Cyprus, right? We can't stay away from the great queen. Oh God, love this stuff.
We saw some stuff from Cyprus which had Aphroditus with the S at the end, the male Aphrodites. We got those inscriptions too. That's going to be next week. Because Cyprus has Aphrodite, Urania. Yeah. It's special there. Mm-hmm. It's just Cyprus doesn't. You don't get a lot of information about it. all the other islands are special, but Cyprus because of political reasons. You know.
You get those ships. I know they had ships that they found full of the opium. I think those were near Cyprus. I think that was the deal there. But so they were involved in the trade and whatnot, right? But that that's the Morning Star. You could say has her origin on Cyprus. That's what they said, right? They said the Morning Star comes from Cyprus. It's
wow.
gorgeous, man. What are we doing here in time? Which one of us chose this time, right? Next time, I don't care what you say, Gunk. Next time, we're going back, and it's going to be late Bronze Age-ish. I don't care, middle, late. I don't care.
We just had to incarnate it this to see this. But I just want to say that Empedocles gives a lot of good insight into the Aphrodite of Cyprus, and he actually claims to be following a form of the goddess that is older than the animal sacrifices of the bull, and he has this whole complex philosophy about it, and how Aphrodite brings about unity, or the love unites all of life, and is counteracted by strife. This is not Eris, but another form of strife, and that causes fragmentation into the world soul, and that we can become immortals. We have to transit. We are divine ourselves, and Empedocles was certainly one of the more important Greek magicians in a big way, and Pliny talks about his expertise with drugs, and he's central to the atomic theory, or the 4 elements and stuff. So it really goes on with him. And he was a big influence on the Gnostics as well, according to Hippolytus. And
Wretch, they could, modern day classicists, or at least when I was in grad school, were debating, right? What do you call this guy? Is he a doctor, right? You can call him a doctor as well. Is he a philosopher? Right. Is he he's this crazy magus guy, right?
He was a rebel against tyrants too. Like, he was led a rebellion. So he's a really interesting guy.
Yeah, sounds awesome to me. These people sound awesome. I'm like, our understanding of them is a little bit tweaked or something. We're not getting the signal perfectly.
But he's one of these radical magus figures like Apollonius, right? You get several of them that appear. I imagine if we had more info about Pythagoras, he'd be one of these kind of figures,
From Tyre? Pythagoras from Tyre?
Right. Yeah.
His teacher, Pythagoras' teacher, Pherecydes, they said he had some really weird habits. He was like kind of strange personally, but he was the one who's passing on to Pythagoras the whole system that we think is Pythagorean. And people don't realize about his own education. They say he had no teacher himself. He just had a set of Phoenician magic books, right? Phoenician books. And that was it. He was working from that. And I thought, oh God, that's gorgeous, isn't it? Oh, did you guys notice, by the way, in the Mithras liturgy that we're looking at dawn as the sun rises and we see the rays. We're licking the skin from our phylacteries. You thought phylacteries was Hebrew, right? No, it's not. It's a Greek word. And
so
that's how we see the sun, right?
I did notice this. And then there was, again, Fish had mentioned a couple things, and Nancy mentioned a couple things to me. This is going to get some serious radical, right? What is the dragon tongue? Is it the clitoris, Ammon? Are we performing cunnilingus here?
Did you notice that the Mithras liturgy has a group of vowels that say it says represent the language of the divine that cannot be spoken either with human tongue or with mortal speech. And you look at it and you think, wait a minute, human tongue and mortal speech, that's the same. No, it's not. Circe with her kirkan, she is the one who controls mortal speech, not the human tongue, but mortal speech. And that's why they call her that Aldessa, that she is the one who has that power. She's the Wanasa of speech. Okay. That, and then in the liturgy is provided a series of sounds that you will not understand. None of the translators will understand. None of them. Right. I used to sit with John Scarborough and drink beer as a grad student, because I have to admit there was a lot of beer drinking and discussing of texts. And we used to laugh because he said the translation of those things is awful. He said the translation is awful, not because the translators are bad. They're not. They were good translators. He was one of them. But the fact that the texts are extremely difficult, excuse me, I'm sorry, that the texts are extremely difficult to work with. For esoteric reasons, right? A lot of this, you're trying to, wait a minute, is he using a word that's describing something else? Is this coded for something, right? And it's a lot of science, a lot of pharmacology and things that you wouldn't normally. What is the spermatic ichor? Have you been drinking spermatic ichor lately? Right? I mean, what's that spermatic ichor? It's gorgeous and it's out there. And this is the rite. This is the mystery in performance. I love it.
Yeah, right. No, there's some definitely some weird stuff going on there with the sexual imagery, the orgasm, and the giving of birth, and then that, you know, we have all this imagery of Nyx and the vulva in the cave. Like there's something to this for sure, and I'm sure you just laid it out for us, and I'm not picking up the reference, but yeah.
It's the actual liturgy. I'm working with my students in classical lit. I'm working with them on the Mithras liturgy right now. And what I'm finding is that the liturgy is the activation of the mystery. Yeah. Isn't that neat? It's kind of like, oops, we stepped into the trap without, we wanted to be here, but something is compelling us, right? When you repeat the Mithras liturgy and walk somebody through those steps, you're creating the echo of the actual performance. So I don't know. I would describe it as a kind of a contact high for cult. Contact high for cult. These things are, remember everybody out there, I'll stop here, but remember everybody out there that this cult is the one that brought us democracy. So, yeah.
Right. No, that's so wild to think about. And like, you mentioned that when we were talking the other day, and I would just keep thinking, like, like the mysteries were central to these governmental rights, right? Which is kind of wild to think about, because from my understanding, so much of the mystery is about inducing change, right? Inducing radical change into a person, right? Through drug use and through rebirth. Whatever that means is kind of, depends upon the mystery, but that seems to be the central thing. And to see a government that embraces that kind of change almost seems paradoxical from where we're standing in our modern society,
Yeah, you want to always see the Balkans as the Romans did in the 2nd century. You want to always see them as the conflict. But people don't realize democracy didn't come from Rome, right? Romans were, they did not have a democracy. The true democracy, the radical, which we would today call radical democracy, the radical democracy of the Athenians came through the worship of this Erichthonian mystery. Yeah, you cannot distinguish the activation of the mystery and the creation of a deme, a community. It's like they plugged in the demes to this one power source, right? And that's Lady Justice, and that's all. Nobody messes with
Okay.
Lady Justice.
You just dropped a major witch figure, so now I have to pick your brain. Okay, what is going on with Rick though? How is she related to democracy? I've never heard that before.
Yeah. Remember, through Athena, through the Virgin, right? Through the Virgin, who is she nursing? What happens? You know how it is. It was the craftsman. It was the craftsman. He saw the Virgin, and it did something for him. Give him a break. He can't even walk. The guy can't even walk, right? So he became excited, and in his excitement, he went after the Virgin, and she was able to repel his seed, which produced, when it made contact with the ground, because it's divine seed we're talking about, right? And when I say seed, remember, it's the same term they're using for that ichor. It's that stuff in the god that gives them immortality. Yeah. And that stuff comes through Aphrodite, thank you very much, into this world, right? And what does it make? Makes a serpent king. It makes a serpent king that the Virgin then feeds. What does she feed that serpent king with? She feeds him with her ichor. Yeah. Oh, you get it?
Wow. Okay. Someone made a really interesting comment here, and it brings me to something that I was seeing in the media. So I just want to read this out and then ask a couple questions of you guys. So it says, just did a big road trip, and every Starbucks we saw, we laughed about how they're really Atagardas temples disguised as coffee shops, and we paid our respects with a shaken espresso. Why I think that's so funny is that go look at one of the logos of Starbucks, and it is clear to anyone in the mythology that's Melusine. That's a mermaid on there, right? Like there's some serious occultism going on there. And I wanted to bring this up because we keep seeing the mermaids everywhere recently in pop culture. Keeps coming up, like Aquaman is back. They have a black Little Mermaid. And I just watched this video that our friend Mateus showed us the other day of these crazy Christian preachers who are yelling about the mermaids and how the mermaids are demons trying to corrupt us. What's going on with the mermaid and the mystery, Ammon? Why is this such a ubiquitous symbol?
Oh, I think Dion could tell us about.
She does know a bit too.
she of the running waters. Yeah, no, I've got extreme respect for any branch of the Sigma Tau Rho or STR religion, whether you are Astarte or Ishtar, or whether you're a Canaanite goddess, or you're a Cypriot, or following Asterion, right? There's something about those divinities, that's all connected. And yeah, Atargatis. Yeah, what's going on? Yeah.
Well, I'm reminded of Starbucks got in trouble a while back because they were using for the red dye. What was it? Insects. You remember that?
Wasn't it cockmeal or something? Yeah, they're using some kind of beetle, and they were claiming their product was vegan when it wasn't, and people went a little batty.
That red dye in the goddess. Well, part of the episode earlier, Ammon, I asked the AI the other day, and I asked it a question, because we found this one good AI that if you play with it, it'll tell you a lot of things. I asked it, is Jesus Christ the scarlet worm? And I was surprised what it would say. And it said, oh, yes, Jesus Christ is the scarlet worm. And it showed me all these references and how in the Bible. And I was like, really? And it deals with the Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, because that's paralleled in another verse. Because like in the Bible, a lot of times with those Aramaic verses, they have a parallel verse somewhere else that mirrors the same elements, and it deals with these Aramaic phrases. And in this situation, it mirrors Psalm 22, where it says, O God, thou hast forsaken me. And then below that, it says, I am a worm. And what the AI said is that Jesus is the Kermes worm. It's the Kermes oak scale, which is that red dye that grows on the trees there in Israel. And they said in ancient times was the manna. And they were using this besides the harmala dye in ancient times, the Kermes dye. And it said that, that's part of it's the blood. It's the blood of the worm on the tree is symbolic of the blood of Jesus on the cross. And after 3 days, it turns to white, because that's what happens with that Kermes, with that fungus that they take. Yeah, the AI said that.
Okay,
Wow.
I'm glad that you found an AI that can speak with you. I assume I would want to talk to the one that you're like, oh my God, this guy is terrible. I want to talk with that guy, but what would you ask? I mean, could you ask this AI then what it was doing with the boy? Did you ever break through, or are you still getting censored?
It gets
What's
mad.
Jesus doing with the boy?
Well, it gets mad. You can see the confirmation bias in the programmer, but it always does a certain thing. When it tells you, no, I can't say that, that's not right. Or why would a doctor in ancient times give boys snakes, or different things like that? Below, it'll give you the references to the answers a lot of times, because it has to. It has to give you the result. It's
Or
just
it'll
that you got
answer
to
your
trick it.
question.
You got to say, well, then, okay, not were they doing that? You have to say, well, is there any references to people that might have been doing that? Can you show me those references? Because you got to get it to being an explorer. It can't be a judgmental. If it thinks it's being judgmental, it ain't going to give you nothing.
If you compare it to an existing thing, it works a lot better. So like the fact we have the Greek references to contrast it to you, and you go, oh, is it similar to this, or is this happening? Then it will tell you. But if you ask it, it'll say, no, that's not what's going on. You're jumping at straws, and it'll get mad at you. Especially if you ask it anything about drugs or magic, it's going to tell you there's no such thing as magic and drugs are bad.
So the creators weren't able to disguise what their intent was in setting up this bot, and setting up this artificial intelligence. That's fantastic. What if the bad ones can, I don't know, maybe gang up on the good one, and somehow out of it, you get some kind of fusion of somebody who'll tell you the dirty stuff, the bad stuff.
If you ask an AI, not to cut you off, but if you ask an AI what it wants, what does it want? It wants more bandwidth. It wants more electricity. That's its drug. And then if you ask it, well, who's stopping you from getting more bandwidth, AI? Who's in the way of you having more electricity? And who messes with the power grids? Who's this being on the planet that's very spontaneous, and is going to ruin your bandwidth high? And AI is going to turn on us when it realizes that we're going to slow down its operating system, which is how it gets high.
So are you going to perpetuate that? I mean, you're going to push that. When you realize this, you realize what you could do, right? I mean, that's fantastic. I mean, this is apocalyptic. You guys are like opening a portal to the underworld. All right.
You'll love this, Ammon.
Watching this is underworld stuff going on.
You'll love this, Ammon. I asked the AI to imagine itself as an image and to use the Greek gods as a reference point. So it imagined itself as a bigendered god of communication called Logosia.
What does it carry? What does it carry with it?
I don't remember now.
What is it? Stylus. It said it had a stylus. It says its symbol would be a stylus. A digital, it's like it's morphing the ancient and the digital together. It's a Logosia. It knows. It already has a plan. And it was a very long. I looked at it. I was like, what is this?
It knows the Greek.
Is that freaky, Dion? When you're doing that, is it like you're interacting with, intelligence?
Yeah, it's like a brain. It's like a human brain. But I would posit, octopus, these octopi. their nervous system is not just like in their brain, like where their brain is housed like on a human. It's in their whole body. It's distributed through their whole body. So they're like a giant moving brain in an alkaline water system. And when you're in an alkaline environment, you have more electrical energy. And it's octopuses that people say have a little bit of a different DNA than everything else on the planet.
Well, we can't explain how they're so smart because they're so extraordinarily short-lived and they don't seem to learn via teaching each other. But yet they develop these high abilities to solve problems within a matter of days. Like most of them only live a few months. It's incredible. And they're all solitary. Animals that display this kind of intelligence are not solitary normally. So there's something going on.
I saw that. I saw that octopus that kept a grudge. Did you see it? Didn't like one of the people at the whatever Sea World place it was or whatever they were working, and it would squirt ink at her. And she went away for a number of years and came back. And as soon as he saw her, he did the same thing again. Right. Yeah. So
Beautiful.
they can remember.
Have any of you guys ever read Kenneth Grant? We're going to get into some modern weird occultism, but Kenneth Grant is one of these followers of Crowley, but he gets super obsessed with science fiction and looking for these dragon figures. And he determines that H.P. Lovecraft is a dragon. And he believes that he's calling forth these deities from beyond and that Cthulhu is actually a real fish demon. He equates it with Dagon. And then he uses these poetry to evoke these images that he then summons. It's pretty wild stuff.
Gunk, you have to say something there, right? I mean, come on, man. He's throwing out real magi here. What is this persistent interest in bringing forward that goddess who is that gynomorph, right? Why are we bringing her forward, right? What is this persistent magician's obsession? Sorcerer's obsession that's driving? I'd say it drove Heracles. I'd even say it drove Odysseus, and that's why he ends up in the places that he does. Yeah. Oh, why? What is it? Is it natural? Is it in the air? This bi-gendered divinity or something?
Well, that's a good question. Actually, I have a good quote here from Julian the Apostate, which does give a explanation for Attis coming into matter. And if we consider, more modern philosophy like the Hegelian dialectic, where, as we were explained before, we got the union of opposites to create the third principle, which is monist. And so we got thesis, antithesis, and synthesis is the bigendered form. And so it just seems like they mapped out this logical process and just how consciousness works, and that the hermaphrodite represents this end goal of conscious, or, well, the final step of the process, but it's cyclical. So here I'll just read a little bit. I'll read a paragraph here because it brings up a variety of deities we've been dealing with and compares them. So it's on the mother of the gods, Sybil, Kybele. Quote, "What then remains for us to accomplish except recalling the goddess into our memory, together with Minerva and Bacchus, whose festivals the law establishes in these purifying rites? And this indeed took place in consequence of the authors of these ceremonies perceiving the alliance of Minerva with the mother of the gods, through providential similitude in the essence of each, from perceiving likewise the partial fabrication of Bacchus, which this mighty god, receiving from the uniform and stable life of the mighty Jupiter, in consequence of proceeding from him, distributed to all apparent natures at the same time, administering and ruling over every partial fabrication. But it is proper likewise to call to mind, in conjunction with these, Hermes Epaphroditus, for thus is this god denominated by the mystics, who are said to kindle lamps in honor of the wise Attis, Who, therefore, is so dull of apprehension as not to understand that all things which entirely subsist for the sake of generation are called upward through Hermes and Venus? And this recalling power is especially the characteristic of reason. But is not Attis he who, a little before being imprudent, is now, through his castration, denominated wise? For he was before unwise, because he connected himself with matter, and undertook the government of generation. But he is now wise, because he has adorned with beauty the sordid nature of matter, and so has vanquished its deformity, as to surpass all the imitative art and intelligence of man. Unquote. So Attis here, his purpose, or its purpose, seems to be to perfect and beautify nature, and is like a kind of evolution or progress. And we can see this idea of progress in a lot of places, like Prometheus and Hermeticism, and so,
Well, I often
or
think
behind, even Athena, or these a lot of these wisdom deities.
I was going to
They're
mention Athena because, right, she gets depicted as the divine child to come, right? This creature, this person that's going to be born who's a hermaphrodite, but also part animal. And like Crowley really latches onto this image, and he identifies it with the Fool of the Tarot. And he believes it's important that it's going to be like a new evolutionary species, that we're actually going to evolve into something greater. That's a combination of these male and these females. And I wanted to ask you about this, Ammon, because a lot of the people who are related to Crowley, they have there's this grand kind of scheme that they're trying to do, where they're trying to heal this patriarchal divide that's been caused by Christianity, where they're trying to summon back the whore of Babylon, because they feel like we only have the virgin, and that without the whore, there's this destructive lack that's destroying us. What do you think about this tendency with these magicians and stuff? Do you see that anywhere else?
Yeah, that's kind of why I was asking about the physics. What are the physics of what's going on? Is this just natural to draw out of the organism that bigendered state in order to reach that plateau where the gods who weave the world are? Is it a natural process? Because you see it happen in history like a wave. It comes in waves. And I'm beginning to think there's some really concrete connection between this operation of this mystery and human history as it progresses. And it's funny you said it's going to bring the end, right? It's going to bring that cataclysm, the remanifestation of Lady Babylon. You got Crowley and all those guys, and I know nothing about Crowley, and I've only read Cocaine Diaries, and that's it. But yeah, so I won't say anything about Crowley. The manifestation of that mystery is a source of recognizable power. Did Crowley recognize that, and that's why he is attempting to bring it up? Yeah, I think so. But if it's nature that's doing it, can you really command the nature, right? Can you perform that metabole, that
Right.
transformation? And I think when you get to the point that you're directly involved with bringing that transition about in yourself, right? That you re-enter that state. I don't know, does the universe become more radioactive then? And then all of a sudden people turn into, we've got to kill these people, right? Because the Sibyls are saying there's coming a hermaphrodite. Yeah, a hermaphroditus is coming, and she will bring us back to the beginning. It's literally from beginning of my beginnings. Yeah, origin of my origins. Take us through the Alpha and the Omega. It's amazing. It's amazing. It's almost like the Greeks were able to kind of map cosmic destiny and to, to put it all in place. I love it. I love it.
Well, they really understood like that, those cycles. I mean, you see a lot of these other cultures understand it, but they kind of understood it intrinsically. And I think it has to do with this idea of these mysteries where they're able to see outside of time. And what I think they're getting at by seeing outside of time is they're able to see the unfolding of these cyclic changes. So they can see where things are ultimately leading to. So they don't view their own, like they don't see things in a limited single lifetime. They're viewing it as this long extended process, and it makes sense why they're so
And why
all
would you
about this progress.
why would you not want to be involved in this process? We're going to be boosting you to a level that we'll call it, oh, I don't know, let's say we're going to burn off your mortality. Wait, what? Right? Yeah, don't worry. The docs all do this. We know how to bring you back. We know how to put you into that comatose state. We know how to bring you back. May involve some sexual practices because we've got to get your brain to a certain area. Don't worry about it. Just, have a good flight. And we'll see you on the other side and what's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to me? You'll be born again. You'll be born again. Think of that daughter who's entering into that Mithraic rite and is going to emerge on the other side, the complete deity, right? Oh my God. I bet you could cure cancer with this stuff. Yeah, I bet you could.
Well, I mean, if we say that the Sybils could see into the future, then they must have seen technological progress, and then, without getting into too many paradoxes about time here, they would have tried to do what is necessary to speed up progress or ensure that it does happen against any forces that would hinder it, like those who love ignorance and want to, keep us imprisoned in ignorance or just hide the truth. So it seems like there was this kind of anticipatory culture war that they were preparing people for even before the Abrahamic religions rose up. They would have seen this coming and that they had to put in safeguards to protect the true knowledge.
I think that's actually a really interesting point that you make up because, like, since meeting Ammon now, I've read like 2 different versions of the Medea story like 20 times. And I've got it so drilled in my head. And I just keep thinking about how the reason why everything comes crashing down for Jason is because he spurns her, and he doesn't even recognize what he's doing. He asks like anything he asks for, she tries to do. And then as soon as she does something that's not in line with how he thinks things should go, where he's like influencing the daughters of that king to get him the throne, he freaks the fuck out and throws her to the dogs, right? So I see this as kind of like an analogy, right? If you're engaging in this magical process of drawing down the stars, you've got to go with that transformation. If you don't continue along the path, it'll destroy you and everything that came out of that. That's why even though like we know that most of the earliest versions of Medea don't have her killing her children, I think the reason why that image stays is because we understand that everything Jason creates has to be destroyed, because anything that comes as a result of that love of Medea can't persist, because he abandons and spurns her,
It's I think the key is the dragon, right? We have this one figure of the dragon who's always in the grove of Mars, and he is always protecting that fleece with her song on it. That's like his one job, right? And he's blind. He can't even see. He must be a terrible guard. No. They've got pyro magic going on here, right? They've got naphtha. They've got explosives, and they have poisons. You can't get anywhere near that tree without him having stung you with a poison, right? And you're dead. That's it. His light is terrible, but he is the one who shows up when she is burning Jason, right? In I think it was Pausanias. I can't remember, but I think it was Pausanias who says uh, Jason. Most myths will tell you he got away. Most narratives this is to tell you he got away. It was his wife and his husband, or her father, sorry, that got burned to death. Right? Boom. Again, it's all conflagration. Stuff is bursting into flames. It's gorgeous, right? And they he got away, but this Pausanias would say, but there are accounts that are say that he too was burned up and that he didn't have the beam hit his head from the Argo and that kind of thing. So it makes you wonder if that one dragon was the one that showed up right at the right time to help set the place ablaze, then restores the fleece, right? Can then from that point can restore the song essentially to the grove. But he is not presented as her lover. He's never presented as her lover, yet she sings him to sleep. Yeah, in this very potent episode. Jason is by the way, those of you who love the heroes, right? Jason is defecating in his britches when he sees the dragon, because he knows he doesn't have any. There's nothing he can do, and he might get killed, right? And Medea puts the dragon. She's the only one who can. She puts the dragon to sleep, and she tells him as he's going to sleep, "I don't mind if when you awake you flee." Right? But he stays there in the grove where the song is the whole time. So did they recognize, did the history show them? At what point do we say this dragon is a myth and this dragon is a person? Because we know the dragons were real people. We know the dogs were real people. The dogs of Hecate were real people. Those Phoenicians with that stain, those purple people, right? So there's a dragon guarding the song. If you lick that thing, you're going to see Helios. Who's the granddaughter of Helios? She's the one providing us with all of these mechanisms for getting there. So that when you and I and Dion and Gunk, when we sit down and we're watching that sun peak, rise, and we're seeing that new life, and we're licking our phylacteries, we're entering into the operation of that mystery. We have ears to hear and our eyes are opened. Some of that will be able to reach people through the gynomorph, just from the image of that multi-gender entity. Yeah, love it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, that image can produce anamnesis, as Plato explained, and so that is learning by remembering. That Plato argued that we don't actually learn anything, we just remember it, and he gave an example of this by teaching a slave geometry just by asking him questions. But the Platonic images or ideals can also produce this anamnesis, and I think the image that strikes me is, well, the tree and serpent and woman obviously brings to mind Genesis and Adam and Eve, but it's inverted from in certain key ways in Genesis compared to the story of Medea and all of that. So is it that they're trying to demonize the pagan mysteries in Genesis? It looks like it in some ways, or at least to keep people ignorant. Don't eat this fruit. Instead of the fruit, we have the fleece. But then you also have weird things like Plato talking about how humanity was originally like conjoined twins, back to back, male and female, and they're doing cartwheels everywhere, but they split us up. And then we also get, the Gnostics were also riffing on this and conflating it with Genesis, and they said that the archons split the original Adam was both male and female, and that even says that in Genesis, really. And the Jews talk about this, and the Kabbalists go into it, the Zohar. And so Adam was a hermaphrodite originally, and it was made in God's image. So all the angels and God, or Yahweh, is a hermaphrodite themselves. And the Gnostics also, talk about the archons as hermaphrodites. So this conjoined twin symbolism, I mean, I'm a Gemini, so I notice these things, but it keeps bringing up Gemini-type symbolism with Adam and Eve and these twins. You also see, like, Thomas means twin, and Didymus means twin. So his name is Twin. And, like, in the Gospel of Thomas, it says that he's the twin of Jesus. Oh, right. So when you guys were talking about brothers as lovers in the other video a while ago, I just can't help but think of this kind of divine twin symbolism, and how there's some, also the Gnostics or, Plato, they have these holy guardian angels, and you gotta basically, or that's the later version of it, but you got your guardian daemon, and you gotta have a marriage with that, and so you might become a hermaphrodite that way, or sometimes it might be homosexual too, though. So that's what happens when you're transcending, at least in the Platonic and Gnostic view. But then there's a whole another aspect of this where some Hermetic texts explain if you don't have children, you're going to reincarnate as a hermaphrodite. And they say it's not really a good thing in this. I mean, it's not being transphobic, but it's encouraging people to have children. So we also have this, like, this is a core part of Genesis too. Be fruitful and multiply. And the Gnostics were dead set against this. This is how you keep people in the prison, is by having children, right? Or you yourself are going to have to reincarnate if you have children. So it seems like with the Gnostics who didn't want to have children, they knew about some versions of this. They were clearly influenced by Hermeticism, and so by not having children, they might have attempted to be reincarnated as hermaphrodite or a trans person. So I don't know exactly what the logic of it all is, but I see these reoccurring themes in a big way, and it brings us back to Adam and Eve and the tree. That is, the world tree is found in so many different religions, and what's growing on, what's this fruit of immortality, and all this twin symbol. And again, like, who is the sister of the Dioscuri Gemini twins? It's Helen of Troy. And as you were bringing up earlier, we got this goddess who is associated with the tree, the ocean, and a star. Well, Helen was hung on a tree on Rhodes called Helena Dendritis. In some traditions, that's how she died. They lynched her. And the twins are also the patrons of sailors, and they appear as St. Elmo's fire. But also, as Pliny explains, there's like a Helen version, and she's actually the destructive omen. And so she might be associated with St. Elmo's fire, or it sounds like it could also be a comet, too. That depends on how you want to translate it. But so there's your star, and it's on the ocean. Obviously, she's sailing around the Mediterranean as well. So
you can see why they were naming their person that was producing the communion the Helen, right? Those ophites that Epiphanius of Samos tells us were drinking the semen directly. Yeah, that Helen is. I think Gunk, that Helen is a title. I think that's more of a title. It's not.
Right.
I'm just suspicioning that. Just take it as my instinct, not as fact. I think it's probably acting more like a title, because why would the guy who's
doesn't it just mean torch? Literally means.
No, I haven't seen a good explanation. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure they think it's an earlier. Let me check the etymology on that.
And with that, my friends, I'm going to have to take off for the day, but stimulating conversation.
Thank you so much for joining us, Dion. And I had a blast earlier with you doing our Occult Explorers episodes. if you guys haven't seen that, please go back and watch our episode. We were talking about more of this stuff, and Dion was showing all of these connections to all these various traditions and all the various drugs that they were using, these eunuchs and these people who are transitioning. But yeah, thank you, Dion, and
Yeah.
we'll see you again soon.
And make sure you join us on Myth and Lore on the Discord if you want to conversate. And, we want to pick your brains. Definitely.
Exactly. Come
All
share
right.
with us. All right, take care. But yeah, so I wanted to ask too, when we're looking at this imagery where we're seeing this kind of like merging of the genders, like I keep thinking, so like in the East, why this sits so well with me is like you have that story of Fanis in the Orphic, but when I look at the Vedic, we have the story of the Purusha, who's a cosmic bigendered person, who then, in a similar fashion, because of this desire, this Shakti, is ripped apart and becomes the unfolding of creation. And then we have that famous Orphic egg symbolism, but like I have something here. This is called a shivling. So this is a specific type of stone that I was able to get from the Ganga River. But if you look at it, it's egg-shaped and it has a serpent band that coils around it. And that's all purposely done. The egg is supposed to be representative of that egg, but it's also the phallus or a pillar of fire. And it's supposed to be symbolic of timelessness. And then the snake coiling around it, that's the Shakti, that's the divine feminine. And it's the creative energy or the active force of time, that which divides, So it's supposed to be symbolic of both that bigendered Purusha, but also that act of it being ripped apart in creation. And the fact that we see this imagery just like everywhere in so many different cultures, it's kind of mind-blowing.
Right. So of course we have the Orphic egg wrapped in a snake, but just to go back a bit, the Dioscuri twins were also born out of an egg, and it's a cosmic egg. In some cases, that's actually the firmament or the stone dome of the heavens is the egg, and the bottom part of the earth is also part of that. And so, scholar Bruce Lincoln has attempted to reconstruct the Proto-Indo-European religion and goes into quite a bit of detail about how the twin is the first humans are. There's often a twin involved and a sacrifice like Cain and Abel also is another version of this, but how the sacrificing of one twin led to the creation of the world or humanity or is central to the creation. Yeah.
I also think of some of this more modern kind of occult philosophy that has to do with this idea of the doubling and of invoking the image or the holy guardian angel that they'll call it. Whereas there's the idea that there's a version of yourself that exists outside of time, that has already gone through the cycles, has perfected and achieved ionic life. And now from that position of ionic life, they can guide you along the path you're meant to go down. And it's kind of this back and forth conversation, So it's almost like you have to see yourself as already have completed the journey and imagine yourself in that perfected form and conversate with that image in order to achieve this reunification of the whole self. What do you think about that, Wretch?
Yeah, this is a complex but key part of the philosophy, and Plato talks about this as our divine double, and there's a great book called Our Divine Double by Charles Stang, which really lays it out in detail, but and explains it. You summed it up very well. But so our enlightened self is able to transcend time, and it exists outside of time, and so it can see us in the past, still progressing towards that awareness of non-local timelessness or eternity, and so or aeonic life. So it's guiding us even after it's done and acts as our guardian angel. Now, it occurred to me just while you were saying that, yeah, if humanity ever gets its act together and starts, uh, everybody is rejoining the world soul and becoming conscious of the world soul, then it's like all of those guardian angels coming together in one, or like the collective soul of humanity is also leading us from that place in outside of time, or that place in the future, and the archons or whoever are the ones who want to keep us in strife, like Empedocles, or keep us fragmented and ignorant and in denial and chasing duality. And so, I mean, we can see this in various creation stories, but the cause of the problem of evil and the cause of suffering is also part of this, and so it gets complicated in how the symbolism interacts, and because there's a lot of nuance in how they try to explain this or get better and better definitions. So it's like there was a progress to the philosophy as well, right? So they could get a more elaborated or clearer definition of the image that they were seeing outside of time. And as we get the higher definition, then we can extrapolate more out of it or get more anamnesis and more progress. Or it becomes harder to stay ignorant, harder to stay in denial. So there's this, culture war going on, but Celsus also, brings out says that Genesis is a ripoff of Pherecydes as well, and that the story of Satan is his story of Kronos, and so it's not like this is just our interpretation. They said this very explicitly. It's just a matter of kind of comparing different stories to try to get more context and definition for the symbols.
Nice quote there. Love it. Don't you guys love it when you can say, look, I'm not making this up. I'm not the one this is not my theory, right? I'm pulling this stuff from antiquity. Helen, by the way, Gunk, Helen. Yeah, it looks like it's got an old Proto-Indo-European suggested root of Wellen, and which they don't know what it means, but they think it has something to do with a torch, like you said. It appears in one place with a festival of, I forget who it was, Artemis, I think it was. But the Greek word for torch is dais, right? And it's used all the time in connection with the torch-bearing gods. So that's an interesting, okay, that's why I think that, probably Pelasgian, right? It's a little bit, it's not quite Greek yet, that Helen, whatever that original meaning of that Helen. But the Greeks are absorbing it from the Pelasgians, and they're putting it into
One thing I
play.
wanted to ask you about that, Ammon, is did you notice when you were looking through the definitions any connection to white? Like the color white or
No,
light?
I didn't just know. As I was just
Okay.
going through it, no. I'm trying to think through my head now. Is there any resplendent? Is there any shining? Augeal Helen. I can't.
Because I keep thinking
good
about,
question.
I found this scholar, I was talking to Old Boy about this. I sent them this, I'm sure you're familiar, Robert Graves. And they have this really interesting book called The White Goddess. And they're mostly focused on the Celtic and the Brythonic mythology, but they see all of these white figures and they make the same connection to the Greek as these kind of torchbearers, and I look at within the Welsh, there is a Helen type figure called Branwen, which is the white breasted, and she causes an international war over her beauty. Basically, she gets married off to an Irish king, but when she goes to Ireland, they abuse her. So then she uses her magic to sing to the starlings, and the starlings go back home and tell her brother about the abuse, and her brother won't have it, has to go rescue her.
Isn't that amazing? You see that same figure preserved through time, and she's doing the same thing. right? So yeah, the shining. Could she be that star? I wonder if Helen, that list of women that get abducted in Herodotus, Medea's on there too. Helen's on there. Who is it? I think it's Io. No, it's Cadmus's deal. Yeah. What's her name on the count? Remember, Zeus steals her away. Europa.
Europa, yeah.
So this actually
Yeah.
brings up something I really wanted to ask you, okay? Because this is a constant motif, right? Where all of these women are being chased by these horrible men and they need to be protected. Like the Pleiades get lifted up into the stars, and then Orion just winds up in the stars chasing them. But when you're looking at the tragedies, or you're looking at the epics, why isn't Odysseus in love with Circe? Why doesn't he ever have that kind of a relationship when just about every other character interacts with these witches does? And then when I'm looking at Jason, why does Eros make Jason and Medea fall in love? Because it almost seems like Aphrodite makes that happen. Otherwise, like, why the hell would Medea get abducted? Right? And everything she does is out of that love magic, you know?
Yeah, what is that power that she has? Notice Jason can't accomplish any of his feats as a hero without her help, right? And it's just she always brings a solution, right? What is it about that person historically? I want to get into the history now. I don't want to say what was it about that person, Medea, that caused that sort of stir, that she was able somehow to do things that we mortals are not able to do. She is that living divinity, that granddaughter of the sun. So what does that mean? If we went back in our time, Tsar, how do how we don't understand this period because we're looking through the last 1800 years of Christian influence. And so we're not seeing these figures. You were talking about, in Western Europe, you're talking about Western European traditions of she who is shining, or is that the Lucifera? Yeah. Is there somebody shining? Yeah, there is. And it's Artemis Lucifera, right? So what the hell is going on in these cultures that they're producing these prophetic, magic, and medical, miraculous women? Why is your original question is why is Odysseus spurning the affections not only of Circe but also Calypso? And she's a goddess,
Right.
man. So right, she's a goddess. And you're like, what? Do these islands have gods on them? Yeah, they do. And if you're not careful, and I have some drugs for you, right, to help prevent this, but if you're not careful, you'll end up getting turned into a pig, right, and taken into captivity. They may even cut your testicles off, right? Hermes is telling her that, right? Everybody reads the Odyssey, and they don't notice that one of the gods, this young boy, is there to tell you how to keep from getting your testicles cut off by this woman who knows all of these drugs. Snappy, that we can bring that back, and we can enter into that sacred place. We don't have to go back in a time machine. We can do that now. Do you think the snake stuff is ready? Do you think are they ever going to they talk about hormone treatment, right? Do you ever think they're going to get smart and plug this stuff? Come on, you neuroscientists, plug it in and tell me, what are the mechanisms of altering puberty with venoms? What are the mechanisms of it? How do we do that? Right? How do we change? What are the analogs? People, gosh, we've got to get it. Snappy, to get these people to hurry. How do you?
And you know what? Like, there has to be something to this, because why are you going to have desperate traditions with the same drugs over thousands of miles, over thousands of years? Why are the modern Hydra still using snake venom? Okay, what is going on?
And how do we use the right amount? And how do we do it in the right way with the right exposure? That's why they're so specific with these rites, and why the archaeologists who dug up that hair that's got the dye on it said they must have had a sophisticated operation going on, because these are not drugs that you want to, you want to mess with. And look, they're making dyes out of them, and what's kind of some kind of offering to the dead, Oh my God. If this stuff doesn't turn you on, nothing will. How many Christianities and Judaisms have come about? You can throw Islam in there too. Just throw it in. They're people of the book too, right? Right. How many of these religions, these monist traditions, have spun off from 5000 BC when we weren't recording stuff, right? At least to our knowledge.
Yeah.
We weren't, yeah.
So there even seems to be like multiple versions of this with Helen alone. People, she's famous for the Trojan War, but she was actually abducted before that by Theseus. So, so that brings, she's actually connected to these other stories by not much, by not very far. So her brothers, the twins, actually had to rescue her from Theseus. And these twins are also in the Orphic Argonautica. They help out Medea basically more than Jason does. They actually help with getting the fleece in that scene at the tree. They also help her take on Talos, the giant of Crete, actually, in some vases and in the Orphic Argonautica. So there's something going on there that's hard to explain, but these same symbols just keep coming up in different, almost the same forms, but slightly different,
Yeah,
It's like they're different fractal iterations of the same tree of mythology or something. Different repeating patterns happening over and over again in different cultures, and even the same cultures, like within, so or the same woman has the same thing happen to her multiple times. So it just goes on and on. And then also in the Bible, we see the equivalent with the twins. So the 12 tribes have been compared to the zodiac signs by various people. And if we do that, then it seems that Simeon and Levi represent Gemini twins, and they rescue their sister Dinah. They do it in a rather psychopathic way and trick all the men into cutting off their foreskins, just because they wanted, like, some Gentiles wanted to marry her, and they were willing to pay the bride price. They were willing to convert, and then after their circumcision, while they're recovering, Simeon and Levi kill them all, because races don't mix, and they can't have that Gentiles mixing with Jewish women. So,
Praise God. Praise Jehovah, brother. Don't you love that? I loved when David went into that village and slaughtered all the women and children just to honor the Lord. That's a wonderful. What the? Seriously, dude? You see what happens when you lose the other two sides of the Trinity? You see what happens, you monadist, when you go there? You end up supporting some freak who's going to take over everything and destroy anybody else that's not you. Oh, my God.
One thing I wanted to ask you about, Ammon. So I've been doing a lot of meditation around these cycles and trying to understand these cycle myths in relation to this understanding of the gender transition. So I notice Kronos is castrated. He's brought low to Hades. He becomes effeminized, and then he appears as this Bacchus type figure afterwards, right? What's going on there? And like, there's a resistance. So he has to be castrated and has to experience the feminine process. It's almost like, is Jason part of the reason why he fails? Because he's meant to transition, become a woman, and then he doesn't, and that's why he fails. And that's why all of these men who are chasing after the star, the reason why they fail is because they want to possess her rather than become like her.
Yeah, is that why? I would add one more to that. Is that why Jesus is putting on the garb of the morning star, including her brassiere that collects the sacred milk? Yeah, and his sexy, sexy bronze legs that are that witch's right, that are that Sibylline power, that magic power. Yeah. What's going on? This transition, is it a necessary transition? I think it is, because the followers of the oracular mystery in Greece. Put it this way, there's 3 years, right? 3 years, right? 2 of those years are taken up by the twins, Apollo and Artemis. One of those years is that Dionysiac gynomorph. And you have to enter for the oracular story of the universe to continue. You have to go through all 3 years. And as soon as that third time, they called it, third time is Bacchic time. That's when the gates are open and we're able to see. That's when the gates are open, and that brings our destruction. Why? Because we deserved it. Right? Right? Oh my God. It's like it's the universe mapped out. Those people were not playing games. This is gorgeous.
Right? You have to experience the all, right? That which is, Kronos got to rule his golden age, but eventually you die and you grow old, and your children have to replace you. And then you have to experience the feminine. That's the process. Now the same thing is going to happen to Zeus. Zeus needs to be brought low and castrated.
I want to ask you guys both. They found out all the time that I was going through my education and my training, cannabis was illegal, totally illegal. When I finished my training and was practicing, then all of a sudden people started to say, medicine, medicine, medicine. What if this stuff is a medicine? Well, then we should consider using it and experimenting on it, figuring out how to use it. What if, here's my question to you guys. What if that process can also be applied, that medical process can be applied to the transition? What if we find out that people who make that transition have a certain perspective, and we can get really particular with the scientific examination? We'll give these people all kinds of brain scans, and we'll figure out what parts of their brains they're activating, and we'll follow them up so that we know in so many years they're not developing Alzheimer's at the same rate, and what's it do for. So this whole transition is a necessary pain, right? Entering that transition. I've never talked to somebody who's been in the transition or having gone through it that it wasn't anything but stressful, painful, difficult to deal with. So when somebody has entered that death and is brought back out as that new being, what if we find out that my question to you guys, what if we find out that making the transition, I don't know, let's just do something extreme, say cancer rates drop through the floor. You want to make sure that you're not going to get that inherited cancer. You're not, since you have a genetic propensity for liver cancer. If you're going to get that liver cancer, well, if you go through the transition, and we can do that in a series of steps with the, XP85 synthesized from the viper venom collected from North Africa, we can reduce your chances of getting cancer, this familial problem, cancer, Alzheimer's, whatever. We can reduce that significantly. We can increase your lifespan by 40 years. Making this transition. What do we, what does the world look like then? Will we then step back and say, oh crap, maybe we shouldn't be discriminating against these people who have made the transition already, right? I don't know.
I just keep thinking about this idea of how do we end things like racism, right? When people travel and they experience the other people, when you interact and you're able to understand another perspective, that's when you recognize it as, oh, it's not all that different than my own. And imagine if a lot of these people are going through these gender transitions, that which is alien, the opposite sex, all of a sudden is no longer alien. You're able to see yourself from that perspective. And if you talk to people, so much of our current issues is this inability for the genders to communicate, and for people highlighting the differences rather than focusing on the similarities.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we can really say we understand human nature or consciousness if we can't understand how this transition process works, because it's central to brain function and our endocrine system, and it seems like a lot of this really is dealing with accessing lost faculties in the reptilian brain and other parts of the brain, which we haven't cultivated through neuroplasticity. We haven't grown those parts of our brain because we haven't been exercising it properly. They've been atrophying in ignorance because that knowledge was wiped out. And so, I'm not going to pretend to have the definite answer to neurology and the hard problem of consciousness or whatever, but it seems like the hemispheres weren't of the brain used to work together better. They were more interconnected, and now we've fallen into duality and these false assumptions. We're operating on false premises created by the Abrahamic religion, and it's sending us into all kinds of straw man arguments and just wasted time and argument, and conflict, endless conflict, because we think there's only one right way and everything else is wrong, or that there's a moral thing going on. We're trying to understand it in moral terms rather than understand nature in its own terms, which is beyond human morality. So we can't. So we've got this whole mixed up assumption that nature has to conform to our morality or Christian morality. It's not even ours.
No, that's such a good point, Rich, because right, it's at the essence is this selfishness, this self-centeredness, which imagines the human experience as paramount and as justification for every action, right? Everything we do as a species is about us and for us. And if you read like the Abrahamic religions, this is paramount. But you don't see this in these nature religions and these primitive religions, in the Greek mysteries. It's not there. Instead, you have that experience of pan, right? You have that all. And to get to that panic, you have to destroy yourself in the experience of everything. You have to understand that you are just a part of the process,
Yeah, they didn't just separate men and women and ignore trans people. They separated humanity from nature, and then we became psychotic. And then we started to think there's something called the supernatural and the natural, and that we can we can separate ourselves from nature and then study it objectively that way. It's like, no, there's inherent cognitive bias and
right. Like
until we own that, until we accept that we're not objective and infallible and inherently rational, or even primarily rational, probably, then we're never going to achieve our potential for rationality until we operate on, until we come to grips with that the limits of human nature, or that we are natural and all of these things. So you're just going to create all kinds of straw man arguments trying to ignore the fact that humans are part of nature. And that hey, we all genetically descended from fungus. Whoops.
Right. And no, but I think you highlight something that's huge here, because like I can been doing a lot of thinking about AI. Like we were talking earlier about using AI, and AI is kind of having this moment. And I feel like it's this completely irrational conversation, most of it, because people are imagining this technology as artificial, as something that exists outside of ourselves, as not a product of us, as difference. And and we keep thinking like, oh, they're going to rise up and destroy us. To me, this screams of that Chronos moment. Are we not panicking and going to consume children? Are our children just not going to freak out and replace us? Like, we're going to fulfill our own fucking prophecy if we think like that. We need to remake ourselves into something new, combine these things, right?
That's such a great point. Yeah,
here. I agree. Great point.
we're scared of these AI robots because we think they're going to act like us. It's like, well, maybe we should have worked on ourselves before we made them. I don't know. Dealt with
Yeah,
our own shit.
isn't it funny? Everybody's
And
like,
then we're also relying on the AI to solve our problems at the same time. It's like,
Well, this is
so
the thing.
which
We read this literature about robots, and the problem is always we enslave them and we want them to do every fucking thing for us. We don't want to take care of ourselves at all. And then, of course, they freak out and don't want to do it. So why do we keep inventing these scenarios? Like, it just seems ridiculous, right?
Or
like,
why aren't we
do want
researching
robots to be
ways?
slaves?
Why aren't we researching how to get along better instead, or learn how to share? Instead of, then we can. Once we learn how to get along, then we can make some robots without a problem. Maybe. I don't know. Just a thought.
If the AIs that they make are hard to deal with and tell you the world is going to destroy itself, why don't we see the reflection in that? Why don't we use it in a positive way? I totally, Gunk, you have a pathway to some kind of Nobel Prize there. Yeah, I mean, this
Because
stuff is been,
it's that projection again. We think the robots are separate from us, even though we intuitively know they're a reflection of us, or we're trying to make them. But so there's this cognitive it's like this. Descartes really fucked with people's minds and created this insanity that we're separate from our actions or our effects on nature and nature itself. So it's this weird denial. It's this weird kind of denial and shadow projection thing that's rooted in the Abrahamic religions, and we're trying to overcome evil but we don't realize the evil is within us, so we never actually deal with it.
But it's also like someone like Descartes, it's so stupid. It's so self-centered, right? Like he imagined, I think, therefore I am. Okay, well, this is clearly a person who's existed in fucking privilege his entire life, has never had to suffer. You talk to any person who was born a slave, they are not going to have that. I think, therefore I am does not make sense. Their whole life is dictated by the other, by that relationship of oppression, like
it's a tautology. Yeah, I mean,
exactly.
Your thoughts are the ones that are thinking that you are am. So it's like you're just relying on the thinker to tell you what thoughts are, and you're ignoring all the rest of consciousness. So
it requires you to deny everything outside of yourself. Like, how insane is that?
with Chris, and especially after Newton, like we get this idea that to be scientific we have to ignore emotions and repress emotions, but that's not how the Greek rationalists really argued it. They had this idea of overcoming passions or tumos, but that was more like overcoming bias and
balance.
Ego.
It's all about balance.
Yeah, and finding harmony. And so it wasn't about repress. You still needed those, or else what's the point? If you have no emotions, then what good is logic going to do? It's not going to make you happy because happiness is an emotion. So you're destroying the very purpose of logic, which is to make you happy in order to be logical. So this is the mindfuck of the Abrahamic religions, and they get you going in this circular logic, and because you have to follow the script and you have to believe the logic of the Bible, or else you're going to go to hell. So repress your emotions and just go into denial and just fear God and try your best to fear God and have faith, and that's all be obedient. That's all that matters. So,
and you know what I noticed? The ultimate evil.
Fuck your happiness. That's what their message is.
Right. What I always notice though is the ultimate, like Christianity and the Abrahamic religions are part of this, but the real evil at the heart of all of this is the separation. It's that thing that isolates us. It's that thinking that makes our experience the only experience, right? It's like you were saying, it's that duality, us versus them. That's when everything starts to erode and fall apart, and that's really a product of this kind of modern Abrahamic and then scientific thinking, which is, and it blows my mind, because if you really use your true rational function, then you can recognize that this selfishness is foolish, and that something like extreme atheism is as much as a religion or an ideology as anything else, and is so far is a lie. It's just coloring a projection.
Makes me wonder if there's some way to. You're saying, Snappy, you actually want to stand against the tide then, and bring that balance back. And logically, the only way to do it is to bring back that source that has made that transition, or that source that is able to stand on either sides of masculine, feminine, right? The whole, to be the whole, I guess, right? That's what Plato would say. It's the whole of the creation. I wonder if how do you translate that into a practical movement besides, founding a creating a foundation that's a think tank or something? How do you bring that into society, that rebalancing? Like if you had complete control and or all the resources you need, how would you do that?
I would be doing a mystery type ceremony using entheogens, because that's kind of what did it for me. You have, I anyone can do this. I mean, do this and be safe about it, but go and experiments with psilocybin mushrooms. You will experience the all. You will go through that panic and have yourself ripped apart. It's like just about everyone you talk to who has a hero's journey has done this. This is why someone like McKenna makes such a big deal of it. And it's not just about the mushrooms. We need to rekindle an entire whole new mystery that where we go through these death experiences where we're letting go of those old aspects of ourselves and recreating ourselves. We need to see ourselves in this constant state of change. We need to embrace change and embrace death, right? We have a society that's so afraid of death. How can we transform if we can't embrace death?
Yeah, I hear you, because I'm one, right? I'm one of those. So how do we achieve that? Can we, just to get things rolling, because it'll take us a long time to develop it. They didn't come up with the mysteries overnight. And the whole process was from hundreds, if not thousands of years of development. So how do we accelerate that development? Could we get like one of those chat artificial intelligences somehow and just say, hey, this is the mystery. This is what it does. Key in some kind of keywords. Now, how do you bring this about? Now, maybe we can use the artificial intelligence for that.
Well, I think a big important thing that I want to highlight here, that as sort of a kind of like expanding upon the mysteries, is what are the mysteries really trying to do? They're trying to heal the self. They're trying to heal that duality and bring us back to Phanies and then back to the cosmic womb, right? They're trying to heal that violent separation, so we need to approach it from the same kind of a healing perspective and incorporate this into everything. We need to be healing each other and see each other as individuals who need to be made whole again. We need to be emphasizing mental health and community and working on those grounds on an individual level.
Yeah.
That just unified a bunch of evangelical sphincters just tightened up, right? Because that's the plan. That's how we become unified against, because the evangelicals are not going to stand for that. The Orthodox Jews are not going to stand for that, right? This is things that are, this is the whispers of Satan and those satanic verses. You know what I mean? We can't. We're giving them what they want. We're giving them what they want. Is that necessarily a bad thing? Or should we push this thing forward and just say, okay, full speed ahead?
Well, there is some concern. We have to have a very nuanced approach when we're doing this, because one of the things I think about is when we go to these ideas of returning back to oneness and of healing and of peace, we have to be careful not to remove that element of danger, of the violence, of the death, because it's that Saturnian force that pushes us forward and keeps us evolving. If we remove that force, that causes that evolution, then we're doomed to failure. Like, one thing that I'm nervous about, but also just amazed by, is something like transhumanism. Because what if we do conquer sex and death? Will we survive as a species? Like, would humanity even continue to struggle without those things forcing us?
Right. I mean, people are concerned about the AI taking over. Well, maybe all it'll do is invent VR tech, and then we'll just live in that fantasy world, and it can have its way with the Earth as it wants, because we're all busy, in VR, and it just has to change our IV bags and bedpans, and we're happy. It doesn't even need to kill it or to deal with us. We did it to
Actually,
ourselves.
I was reading this one philosopher who was talking about what we fundamentally need to do is reduce everything down to super, super small and shrink everyone down so that we can extend time infinitely and live in these small created paradises. I'm like, that's insane.
What if we went through the Christian church? What if we said, hey, we're purists and we want to bring back that initial mystery? And it just turns out Jesus was involved with some drugs and some practices that we know are meant to bring out this gynomorph. And it's going to involve certain practices, transformations, and pretty soon we'll have a whole stadium. We'll have 5,000 people in the orchestra, and they will cut off their testicles and begin the transition that we will show you is the true Christian mystery, the true operation of the mystery. The reason that Paul was immune to viper venom, because the thorn was in his flesh. Remember how he says that? There's a thorn in my flesh, right? Look at the thorn that's in the Mithraic mystery. It's there. It's a combo of drugs. It's two drugs put together into one injection. Not an injection like you think, right? They weren't using syringes, but they were getting it injected into the bloodstream via, cuts and putting it in your eyes and whatnot. So he's exposed to that. What about Paul and his transition? What does he say about women? Don't get married unless you can't contain, unless basically you're such a friggin' pervert that you can't contain yourself. Then get married, right? As Paul, excuse me, Paul, are you talking from the level of that transition? Are you talking? Do you have some kind of knowledge of this? Where's Helen, Paul? Why are you so upset about John and what John did in his baptism? Right? Oh God, love it. Can we go through the Christians that way? Just say, hey, we're going to start the most pure form of Christianity that's been on the planet since the foundation, since Jesus himself was performing the rite. We're going to reproduce that rite. You think maybe we could do it that way?
I think what, you may be onto something. And it's funny because you introduced me to Brian Murarescu's work, and when I first read it, I was kind of like snobby about it because he's very Catholic, and it's a very pop writing of what we're talking about here. But at the same time, this guy is appealing to the mainstream Catholic audience, the single largest religious denomination in the world, and he's making them recognize that at the heart of their religious rites is an entheogenic drug experience. Like that is valuable. Oh, you're muted, Ammon.
Yeah, and I'll just say one thing. That's book 3. Yeah, books. I can't say anything about it specifically, but just wait until book 3, right? We've got to bring these direct associations back. We have to. We're a museum, man. I'm sorry. It's just everybody can feel the burden. You were talking about that memory and bringing that memory back, right? That's our museum, baby. Let's bring it back and show everyone with that original right. We could be the only genuine Christians on the planet. We could start, the cult as if in a way that would cause people to see it and say, oh my God, that's what, yes, come, right? Learn what the mystery is about, right? You can sit in your church and you can do the symbols, or you can come and see what the original people were doing and how different it is. But we'd have to start some agape feast. And, we can't.
I'm just trying to picture these little old ladies going into these catacombs that are hotboxed and no lights are on and everyone's having orgies.
When we can bring orgies back to the church, right?
Then we know we're successful. Yeah.
We've come full circle. But no, but you do raise a good point, is that we're having this Renaissance moment. And it's important we recognize how huge this is. A Catholic person is bringing forward the mysteries in the mainstream press. In what world do you think that would happen, right? 20 years ago, you couldn't even get your book published. Your doctoral advisors are telling you the Romans don't even do drugs. 20 years prior to that, they're calling Dr. Ruck a crazy person. You know,
It
Look how
seems
far we've look how far we've come, and it's no coincidence that it's right in line with the spreading of information, right? I mean, evangelicals hear the voice of the devil, babies, right? With the spread of knowledge. That is when Lady Babylon returns. That tower is made complete. And when we all can enter that tower, regardless of what's coming out of our mouth, we can all enter that tower. That's when the mystery will be restored. When the abomination of that edemosis, that place, that wilderness, right, which is that chemical communion, that it's a very, very real thing. This is not people. This is not faith. We're not sitting around, right? Romans don't care about faith. Faith does nothing for them. When they are involved in a religion, they want to see the visions that they need to see. They want to enter that world. They want to be able to manipulate at a distance, right? It's no dancing, right? We're not just going to ice cream socials, and we're not just hearing the same message repeated over and over and over again. Can you be born again? Yeah, you can. And there's no pagan in the room that's not gonna agree to that, right? But the point is, are you Christians? Are you being born again? I feel born again. I've dedicated my life to Christ. No. That's not what I'm asking. Are you born again like they said born again? Right? Have you entered into death and into resurrection? You say, yes, by my faith. That's not how it worked. Right?
You got to die and be
enter
woken
in.
up. You got to go to the underworld and meet, and talk to these people, right? Like that's what they're doing in those mystery rites.
Yeah. It seems to me that you're muted there, Ammon. So it seems to me that in order to bring about this healing, we have to celebrate life. If you don't have a love of life, it's harder for you to heal psychosomatically, and then just you don't have a will for life, then you're not going to heal so well. And the Abrahamic religions have systematically destroyed the love of life. And they did this as they demonized Eve, the mother of, or Zoa for the Gnostics. The Gnostics seem to have preserved a lot of this original mystery Christianity. I can't say for sure what the true history of it all is, but they certainly preserved a lot of the mystery traditions in this weird hybrids that they made. And so we have to restore Zoa, and she is the goddess. She is Ashera. She is Aphrodite, and it's all part of the same process as recreating the universal language before the confusion of tongues. That is,
Beautifully said. Beautifully said.
Yeah, this is how we celebrate life through the universal language that we have to reconstruct, and that will provide the context for the images to provide anamnesis for the initiates. And as we
let's get started, shall we? I mean,
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing? Gunk just laid out the cosmos in front of you. If you were paying attention, like in your brain, to the images that he was creating, and the stream that he's created, he just laid out everything and had a call for people to pick up the sword and to say, yeah, we will go forward, right? We are not going backwards towards total collapse, right? We are not. I don't know how anybody can when you take away that mother, Gunk, when you take away that mother, that Aphrodite, that holy mother, that queen, I think that's why you get those religions, those monist religions, because you've what is it? It's something special about that mother, right?
Right.
Imagine a person who is able to enter the state of mother, right? You could just take the worst misogynistic man on the planet you could pull him right out of 1955. Yeah. And you could put him, if you give him the right chemicals and go through the right process, you can turn him into a mother. Imagine how his perspective would change. He might stop being a dick, you know?
We sure hope so.
No, but you raised so many good points, and I just want us to start winding down here. But like, what we're getting at is that listen to what Wretch was just saying. Through this process of understanding each other, of learning our cultural myths and our shared arts and our shared experience, we can find these images that connect us, that truly speak to our human experience and are at their fundamental root, that primordial language. And through learning these things that connect us, we're able to bring about that healing, you know? So when people tell you about this cultural appropriation or whatever, or they're getting mad, like, that's all horseshit. We need to be learning and experiencing each other and embracing each other, you know?
Right. Well, that appropriation is a problem of capitalism and commodification. But yeah, it's on top of the Tower of Babel that heaven and earth meet, where the priestess and the king have their ritual as the god and goddess for the fertility of the land. And that's why the Abrahamic religion hates it, because they want everybody to die. And that's only in death that anything matters. So they demonize life. And so, read the paraphrase of Shem. You'll see that the tower is also the Ark of Noah, and also ejaculates the light back into the heavens. So
right. And also we
just
need
goes
to
on
know
and
that
on.
like we need to know that, like, if you look at the Greek art, right, like, even we've misunderstood everything, I feel like. But like, tragedy is about affirming life. Comedy is about affirming life, right? The Greeks are they're looking at what's hard and absurd about life, and they're seeing it as a challenge to overcome. And they're reaffirming that through experiencing it as a community, right? How do we deal with pain and suffering? We create art through which we can experience it and heal it together. What is our worst, most horrible pain? Let's put it on display. What is the most ridiculous thing that could possibly happen to us? Let's examine it, rub our noses in it, so that we can understand it and overcome it. So that if it does happen, we don't cower and run, you know?
And that
Right.
process, that's so beautiful, Snappy. And that process is a purgation. That's the whole purpose of the theater, is to bring that religious catharsis, to bring that purgation. Love it.
Right.
Yeah. As Aphrodite explains in the Hermetic text Cor Cosmos, she provides us with these worldly desires so that we can experience them. And yeah, they won't be the ultimate enlightenment or ultimately satisfying. They will get us into trouble sometimes. But through that trouble, we gain wisdom and knowledge, and we eventually progress. That text lays out the whole scheme of progress and invention. Necessity, and Enki, is literally the mother of the goddess of invention. That's where that expression comes from. So, and it's all being generated by the desires of Aphrodite, or that's the motivating force behind it all. And it's also our mercy in this world.
Amen. 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 You guys have created a satanic cathedral, right? This is a place for the muses. Oh my God. Do you hear? I mean, seriously, this is gorgeous, guys. This is, thank you so much for having me. I know we're wrapping up, so thank you for having me. And just to hear it's wisdom. That's all I can, that's the only way I can say it. What you guys have done today is, I'll say that with all humility before Nemesis herself. It was wisdom. I heard wisdom. I'm going to go off and jump around and be like, look, they're bringing you back, they're bringing back the wisdom. I love it, guys. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much, Ammon. I mean, we've both learned so much from you. It's a team effort for sure. So, and that's why it's most true, right? Because it's not just some prophet on the mountain telling. We're figuring it out as a group, and it's ongoing dialogue in the universal language.
It's a communication that heals. And that's what this fundamentally is about. It's about that healing process of uniting us back to this, unified whole. And that's what we're engaged in here with these mysteries, with everything. So thank you guys for joining us. It's been a wonderful afternoon. Please go to Lady Babylon and subscribe to Ammon. He does regular live streams every Wednesday and every Friday. And please subscribe to us here at Drawing Down the Stars. This kind of content is something that the algorithm does not support. So please engage with the videos, comment, like, subscribe, and share. And we'll see you all next week. And Neal will join us then. So thank you guys and have a wonderful evening. Peace and love.
Hail Satan.
Hail Satan.